steel and gears. It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay. Hello. We are here with Walt Bismarck. It just took us 45 minutes to figure out streaming issues. Welcome, Walt, for the second time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes. So you are a fabulous Substack guy. You talk about Adderall, platform manipulation, wage theft, whores, and status signaling. And these are, 6 out of 6 of my favorite topics. So we're definitely aligned.
Yeah. No, I guess very wide variety these days. I guess that's kind of the problem, though, is like when you have a large variety of topics you write about, like somebody will subscribe, because they want essays on meta politics, and then if you start uploading music, then they'll get kind of pissy if you do kind of like Gonzo style writing or like short stories. It can be sort of hard, but like when you're dipping your finger in a lot of different pies, it also kind of gives you exposure to a lot of different people, and when somebody can appreciate all different facets of your character, it's really nice because you can. I guess it sort of gives people access to like a lot of different sides of your interiority right away, and you can build, pretty rapid connections with people, I guess.
Yeah, well, and that's you and I are both, I think, similar in that we're oversharers,
Yeah.
because we're true artists, and this is what true artists are supposed to be, but that's been sort of lost in this weird period where everybody's both sort of anonymous and not anonymous and all those various things. But you recently, I wanted to talk to you first and foremost about your understanding of the elites, which I think is, and just sort of you're really, really good at ferreting out these uncomfortable, but very satisfying for an outsider truths about men and women and the way the world works. And in particular, the part that I'm interested in is like understanding the elites, like the way that elite people think and that sort of thing. Oh, we already got a super chat. Thank you, Robert Weisenfeld. Let me know, Robert, if you want to say anything. But you said something recently that was basically like. Sorry. You said something recently that was you said something to me, which I thought really caught my attention, which was conspiracy theorizing is low class. It's low class coded. So what did you mean by that, and why is that? And then we'll get into your Adderall piece later, but let's start with that.
Sure. Specifically, I said low status. So, I mean, like when it comes to social class, that can mean a lot of different things. And I think in America, it's kind of weird because we, like the social class system in America is a lot more sort of flexible than it is in Europe, right? And some people have even said that Americans don't have social class. I mean, obviously that's not true, but it's definitely like less sort of tied to money. Because I definitely think in America, it's pretty easy for like a sort of entrepreneurial kind of trashy sort of person to like make a lot of money really fast and then spend it really quickly. I mean, I've done that at several points in my life. A lot of my family members have, and it's sort of like less. I don't know. Like I think in Europe they have a much more sort of like kind of static, like kind of ingrained system of class. So it's not so much class as it is status. And what I mean by that is there's certain behaviors that I guess connote abundance or connote power or the ability to act freely, and then there are certain behaviors that sort of connote scarcity or connote I guess weakness or a supplication or approval seeking, right? And I think that I think that there are also certain behaviors that are, Hanania writes about this a lot himself, right? It's like oppositional defiant behaviors. So he writes about how like Black people will, for instance, display a certain contempt for high culture, and he's written how like a lot of the American right has sort of adopted a lot of the same behaviors. I don't know. Have you ever seen The Wire?
Of course.
You know, there's that scene where like the upper middle class like teacher like Black guy is like taking the students out to like a nice like fancy dinner. And they're starting to like, these are kids who are like smart, you know, that they come from the ghetto, but they're like relatively high IQ in that ecology, but they start acting like really like weirdly ghetto, and they start like expressing, because they're insecure, they feel like they're not. And I think a lot of us can sort of relate to that. Like, I don't know if you've ever like, you know, dated like a liberal girl and like, you know, she brings you around her friends and then you start acting very chuddish, like to sort of like play up that side of yourself. And there's an extent to which you could actually lean into that and have fun. And it can sort of even be like a sort of cooning thing where you're sort of, you can sort of like play with that in a sense. You can almost like take dignity, assert dignity within that framework by saying, you know, by adopting behaviors that are sort of high status in your world and low status in theirs. But there's a hyperbole like way to do it. And you see a lot of Black comedians like Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle kind of do something very similar. But then like, if you don't do it well, it can probably...
You're getting far from your mic. Come close. Come back to your mic.
Yeah, is this better?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is there's multiple different competing status hierarchies, I think. And I think that we're living in a world where we're seeing divergent status hierarchies within the right and the left, right? And I think that the right status hierarchy is very vicious. It's very sort of commercial. And I think that's sort of like the mainstream, right? The dissident right has kind of its own thing. And then on the left, it's more of the Brahmin status hierarchy of, you know, having like ideas that are seen as sophisticated and thoughtful, and, you know, like having conspiracy theories as part of your worldview. In that ecology, like, it's not really about whether they're true or false, because I think very few people are like consistently assess truth claims purely on truth or falsity. I think a lot of times it's more about the status signaling or the tribal affiliation that a belief will convey. And you know, we all have things that we you know we're not as personally invested in, where we do kind of assess things on their truth merits or not. But when there is that sort of identitarian balance to it, I think that's when we do sort of like stop being like as purely rational.
Well, right, but okay, so it's funny that you bring up that scene from The Wire. I wrote my like college admissions essay or something on taking some of my Black friends to like not even a really fancy restaurant, but like a slightly fancy restaurant. When I came back, in my law school admissions essay, when I came back to Evanston, where I'm from, because I grew up with like mostly Black people, and that exact thing happened to me in real life. That like I brought my like hood friends to some like slightly nice restaurant when I was like visiting, and I basically lost touch with them. And yeah, like one of my friends, right, they acted like more ghetto, and they were like really pissed that like they like wanted boxes for their chicken wings. And I'm not even saying this racistly, like literally one of them wanted boxes for their chicken wings. This is my friend Joe, good friend. And they didn't bring all the chicken wings back or something, and he like threw a fit because he thought they like stole one of the chicken wings. And it was just such an incredible moment, because as you're saying, it's like, yeah, like I'm sure everybody there thought, oh, these people are ghetto, but actually they were playing up the ghetto because they were like uncomfortable. But like what do you mean? How does this deal with conspiracy thought though? Like, what do you mean?
First off, I want to point out that we all sort of do this behavior, right? Like if you've ever had like you know, if you have like a friend who's like very artsy or sophisticated, they take you to like a Euro like art house movie or something. Like sometimes like people will play up sort of like not understanding it, or being like I'm a simple man. I'm sort of like we all sort of do this kind of shit, right? So I guess it relates to conspiracy theories because again, it's a question of status. How are you sort of presenting yourself? How are you sort of conceiving yourself? And a lot of public intellectuals, they don't want to be associated with something that's seen as sort of vulgar or sort of like lowest common denominator. And like the thing about conspiracy theories is that like some of them are true and some of them are false. And but the thing is, it tends to be, I guess there's a number of factors involved, right? I think the thing is oftentimes we will like something will come out. We'll think of something as a conspiracy theory for a long time, and then like the powers that be will just like admit that, you know, such and such was the case. And then all of a sudden the elite consensus will be just like, yeah, this is, you know, historical record, and it's no longer a conspiracy theory. And it's sort of annoying because like people are never really vindicated, right, when they're sort of proven right. But I think that's sort of like by design. And I think that the sort of idea is, I think it's a sort of like emergent consensus among elites, like not to sort of like talk about that sort of thing. And I think that it's almost an idea that you sort of massage, you keep the social order going by having certain polite fictions that we're all supposed to just sort of ignore. I mean, take the Epstein's Island thing, for instance. Like everybody knew about this. Like he literally had a plane called the Lolita Express, and like everybody knew about this for years. And it was just something like people would sometimes joke about it. But I mean, the same thing with like Cosby and stuff. Like people would. I'm sure the same thing with Diddy. I mean, like people just know this shit, and then it's just like in people in the know, you know, behind the scenes, and then it just all of a sudden, once something breaks, like everybody's talking about it, you know, like officially on the record, and it's just something. But it's like this weird discontinuity where it's like you're very low status. Like if you were talked about Cosby or Diddy or Epstein before then, you would have been seen as like trashy, right? Like before it's like acceptable. But then like once the dam breaks, all of a sudden it's high status to do it. Yeah, I mean, it's very annoying for people who are consistent truth tellers. But the thing is, very few people are. Like basically everybody, including you and me, you know, everybody has like certain identitarian things that inform like what they want to talk about, and where they're wanting to be strategic in their messaging and diplomatic, and then where they're wanting to be like a grenade thrower, right? And we all sort of make that calculus individually, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's really enlightening, actually, that you said this to me, because I have a very poor self-mirror view, which is part of the reason why I'm not a good Twitter poster. You know, I've always been a C grade Twitter poster, which everybody can agree with. You know, I'm good when I do long form stuff because I'm a good long form writer, but I have a very poor ability. Really, really good posters know how they seem, and they know how to play with that perception that people have of them, you know?
Right.
And it's actually really funny because I'm always like poking around in the dark because I have very poor self view, like bird's eye view. But I've always had this feeling that, yeah, when I broach certain topics, people, particularly a certain type of sort of internet gatekeepery type person, gets really annoyed by it. Like they really don't like it. Like an example was the thing that we were talking about. The reason you actually responded to me, and the reason why Hanania came after me in the first place, which was talking about whether Travis Kelce is a publicity a manufactured publicity guy, right?
Yeah.
And it's any time I've brought this up, it really pisses off the like elite, not elite, but like the crust of posters who are like professional, you know, like the Hanania types. And I've always wondered why. And it's always driven me crazy. I'm like, why don't you want me to talk about this? Like, this seems like it's a great thing. Like, why can't we analyze this? And you totally answered it, because it's like, for them, that's throwing a grenade that they really don't want to throw for some reason. Same thing with the Macron wife truther, he's a man thing. They hate that. They don't want to talk about it for some reason.
Well, yeah, it's also interesting because somebody like Hanania, if you look at him in particular, he's almost on the hard edge of the Overton window, I guess you could call it, right? It's in terms of, like you're saying, kind of a gatekeeper role. You know, it's sort of interesting. I mean, on one hand, he also platforms people like Jared Taylor and even Spencer, right? Like he's spoken to them fairly openly. So I sort of do view him as a transitional figure who's kind of valuable in that sense. But he also is, in another sense, a gatekeeper in the sense that he is just on sort of like you could call it the extreme edge of the mainstream like publicly acceptable window of positions, right? And I think that because of that, he's very conscientious about what views he adopts publicly. And this is something people talk about. Like a lot of people think it's kind of shifty to be sort of performative or be sort of intentional about how you sort of cultivate the public presentation of your ideology. But the thing is, I think we all do that to some extent because we all know. Like, look, if you're going to be strategic, you have certain views you're going to care about more than others. You have priorities, right? So we all downplay, like we're going to like maybe be more diplomatic in our messaging about certain topics than we would others because we know it's more sensitive, or we know that we need to have certain coalition partners that we like. For instance, I'm not really a trad by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to be very respectful in how I approach certain issues because it was partially in response to the whole like stop being mean to slutty women thing. I saw you know, like when I wrote that, I sort of like threw a grenade into the public discourse, and it was good in the sense that it kind of helped me go viral, but it also made a lot of enemies in the sense that you know, like there were certain things that I wasn't being very discreet about, or I wasn't, you know, being very diplomatic about. And since then, I've kind of like tried to take, you know, it's hard because you could also be overly calculating, and that can come off as slimy to people. And I have on occasion, right? So it's kind of a question of like, you know, because you don't want to be like Christian either, not have any sort of like intermediation.
Right. But you have to kind of blend the things. And I think a big thing that happened with the online, right, was the reason why trannies was such a big issue was exactly one of these things. That was one of these things where it was like inherently bourgeois strivers don't really care about trannies, right? Because elites don't care about trannies. Elites don't care about trannies. The bourgeois strivers know the elites don't care about trannies, so they want to be like them, so they don't care about trannies, right? Whereas the kulak and below, you know, the MAGA chud really cares about trannies, right? And so that's why that's such a great wedge issue for splitting the right, so particularly the dissident right, because it's like you have the one group is they're already overextended, being conspiratorial about race, about all these other things, and then you show up at their door and you're like, hey, let's talk about trannies, and they're like, no, like let's not go there, like we don't care about that because it's too much, and you don't want to be too like, you're right, you want to be spicy enough but not just spicy on fucking everything. Because then, if you're too spicy on everything, then like I guess that appears sort of bad impulse control and sort of low class, right?
Yeah, I would say with the tranny thing in particular, like that's something I spoke with Dan Baltic about, and I think for some of this stuff, we just have to sort of accept that intellectuals and artists in their own spaces are going to have different sensibilities, and that's kind of something that we should just kind of keep to ourselves, like in those spaces, without necessarily having to. Like people who don't want that kind of stuff, like they don't have to expose themselves to it. And we could be respectful of that. We could just be respectful of context. The thing is, I treat Substack like it's my own personal salon, right? I just kind of like, you know, like I don't like the idea of having to like censor my own impulses. That said, like there are certain coalition partners I don't necessarily want to alienate. And maybe there are certain things that I do, you know, play up or play down. But again, it's not a question of being dishonest. It's a question of just being diplomatic and of just not being autistic, really. Like everyone does this. Yeah.
But you and I, well, we both are not like, I think that the thing that defines us is, as Doe 917 here says, a lot of people who are on the inside know how to keep their mouth shut about things. If you start talking about it, you have revealed yourself as an outsider. And I think that's exactly right. And I think actually, I'm very thankful for people like you and Doe 917 here for red pilling me on this, because I never understood why. I always thought, hey, aren't we in the business of truth telling? Like what, you know, I always view, I love Alex Jones, you know what I'm saying? Like I love Alex Jones. So I'm always like, hey, why aren't we all trying to be like Alex Jones, you know? But the reality is you can't, can really only be one Alex Jones, and he's way far on the side, right? He's way in his own thing. Whereas for the rest of us, we kind of have to play this dance, this game with the gatekeepers. And gatekeepers, by definition, don't like oversharers. And they don't like people. They also don't like oversharing.
They don't like when you get meta about it. Like this is something, and I found that like women in particular, like this is like the reasons women hate incels.
Hold on, yeah, keep talking.
Yeah, the reason women hate incels so much is because incels like sort of quantify and formalize a lot of sort of.
Sorry, we got a water delivery going on in the background, but don't worry.
Yeah. So there's a lot of social dynamics, a lot of power dynamics and status hierarchies. Incels will sort of formalize or talk about in an explicit way that sort of makes it too real, right? And a lot of the things, like a lot of these dynamics they're sort of like easier to sort of talk around. Like you can kind of pretend they don't exist, or you know, like almost to an extent they exist more to the extent you talk about them. And I think that they become kind of crueler and uglier the more you talk about them. And I think that's the reason the women in particular hate incels. But I mean, it's also like libertarians and rationalists. There's all these groups that are sort of low status in a sense, in sort of like normal society, and especially in like sort of artistic or cool circles. The reason being is that people who are sort of like quote unquote cool really hate it when you talk about social dynamics in a formalist way. Right, it's very repulsive to people. The reason being that a lot of these status hierarchies, they exist by curation. They exist by like gatekeeping
Yeah.
And it's sort of obfuscating the system by which the gatekeeping happens. It's by obfuscating the metrics that are used to assess people that the gatekeeping can be done most effectively. And the people who can rise within existing status hierarchies the most adroitly benefit from obfuscating the rules. If the rules are said explicitly, that hurts them.
Then everybody knows them, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Especially, and it helps people who are less cool, who are kind of autistic, navigate their way to the top, and they don't want that, right? So that's why it's actually very low status for me to be talking of things like this.
Exactly, and that's exactly right. It's very interesting and very well said. But you have to also admit, I tell the story all the time. I went to Tenants of the Trees here in LA, which is like the the coolest possible bar, 10 out of 10 maximum, hardest to get into. Yeah, so with Caravaggio saying don't scare the host. See, I hate when people say that. I know that people do say that, and that is what we're talking about. But I actually dislike that. And here, let me just make my point here, which is I went to Tenants of the Trees' party there the other day, and like 6 months ago. And it was like kind of like and yes, I hate even using this word, but the it girl type of poster, Dime Square type person, but in LA. And she's, looks like an art hoe in every other possible way, but except she has. Thank you so much, man. Thanks, appreciate it. Except she has InfoWars stickers on her arms, right?
Yeah.
And that's supposed to tell us that she's cool and edgy, right? And frankly, I mean, think about Trump, right? Trump started as an Obama truther. I mean, talk about like the least high status possible thing. But that on the chessboard, he was able to take that and, take over the whole chessboard, because the substrate of conspiracy actually is extremely powerful. Like, we don't want to. The reason we won is because of this, basically, right? I mean, like Rogan, big conspiracy, Trump, big conspiracy, BAP. I mean, all these guys are basically conspiracy people, right? So it's not. It can also be used as a high status signal in a way, or at least can become that, right?
Yeah. So what happens is oftentimes like low status coded things are sort of a vector to power to like high status people who can sort of mobilize. If you look at someone like Julius Caesar, right? He sees power in Rome specifically by being like an ultra high status guy who specifically mobilized like the lowest segment of society who was kind of getting screwed over by very sort of like elitist policies from the optimists at the time, right?
Right. Yep.
So I mean, similarly, Trump is basically Caesarist. He did more or less the exact same thing. And the really annoying thing is the way it always works in practice is something is very like incel coded until it's like suddenly in power, and then all of a sudden it like gets you laid.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like nobody talks about that, and if you talk about that, then you lose status. So it's like it's fucking annoying, but that's just how it works, and you just have to like game around that.
Well, and you got to figure out which things are. Depending on what you want to do, you have to figure out which things are coded, which horses to bet on, basically, right? You got to kind of like choose your horses.
You got to present it. It's performative authenticity. You have to present it like it was something you always very earnestly believed the entire time, because it's very low status to be calculating about it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's also, but here's the X factor. The X factor here is that it's like, I don't know. And this is a vote for people like you and me that I wish could be true. I don't know if it actually is true. Maybe, I'm just, not so bad at playing these games that I'm trying to cope. But the one role, there is such thing as a role in society. Take Alex Jones. There should be kind of or like what you write about, understanding the pipes of this stuff, understanding in a cynical way the machinations of elite power, actually does have a tradition, at least in America, of being clouded as fuck, right? I mean, like Hunter Thompson, like our journalists, our history of boomerfied journalism and art, it's all about kind of it's all about scaring the hose a little bit. It's about like saying the thing you're not, or pointing out something you're not supposed to say, right? I mean, that's always kind of like viewed well. What?
Yeah. But it has to be in a sophisticated way, and oftentimes, you have to do it with panache, and you have to know the rules before you break them, right?
Yeah, panache is right. That's what people say about Bap. That's what you said about Bap. You said he does it with panache, right? It's like that's how he's good at it.
Right. And the thing is, if you're extremely high status in one regard, you can sort of use that to give you buffer room to be low status in other regards. Right. And that's what like you can't just be like a loser all around. But if you're like extremely high status in one area, then being sort of trashy in another area almost is almost like it almost signals high status in a sort of oblique way, because you're sort of like somebody was referring to this, like at the Democratic convention, like somebody was talking about like video games or something on stage, and somebody was like, this doesn't make sense, like this is very low. But the whole point of it was the governor of Colorado, I think, Jared Polis. I think that the point was by being sort of like very low status in one sort of, it sort of signals that you're not insecure, that you're not calculating,
right,
and it's vulnerable in a sense. It's like how like being like a little, like oftentimes women will find it very attractive if you're like a little faggy in like one or two areas, so long as you're overall very masculine. Like it's sort of like adds dimension and
right. Like they want you to be right. You want to be masculine in some ways, feminine. Yeah. So we're basically talking about just not being an extremist in any way, and sort of trying to balance shutting the fuck up about certain things with talking really openly about other things, and kind of pick your lane. I think that's probably the thing I've suffered from, is just choosing, I'm so distracted, I'm going to talk about everything, let me talk about everything, blah blah blah, whereas really you want to just kind of like target the things you're going to be conspiratorial about, and really be like a truth teller about. And then you don't need to do that about every single you don't need to jump at every single thing that comes up. Although
I think you and I have something in common, which is that you and I are both people who are neither like extremely like 100% spontaneous about this kind of thing or 100% calculating. Like Hanania strikes me as somebody who can be incredibly calculated, and he can have certain things he wants to push, and then in other things he can just be like Matt Iglesias tier and be sort of like performative. I mean, again, I'm just speculating. I don't know. Like maybe he's being 100% authentic all the time. I don't think so. I think he is very calculated in his public presentation, and he has certain things he cares about, and he buys space. He buys runway to do that. And I think that you and I do that to some extent in certain areas, but I think that we don't necessarily have, like, we are at the end of the day, like, we do have that sort of like artistic impulse to just be very radically authentic on certain occasions in a way that might not be optimal, for like an ideological, like propagandizing purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have any plotting in me at all. I am the least. I can count. I can remember the times that I've spent any time calculating anything ever. Like I'm a totally like from the gut guy, but that's as we're saying here. I think that can be negative, because then it's just you're like you're just like a dog. You're not agentic. You're just whatever comes your way. You're just reacting, and that's not good. Like you want to be calculating a little bit, and know your lane, and you have a abstract sense of where you're headed. But as you're also saying, you don't want to be too much like that, because then that's low class and gross. And you said something in one of your things recently where you said that you. Okay, so let's just talk about this great piece that you have. You have this incredible piece of writing called "Leaving the Methno State" that I listened to on Substack last night at the gym, and it's about you getting off of Adderall. And what's so funny about me listening to this is that the guy's voice on Substack, he sounds exactly like Martyr Made. It's obviously based on Martyr Made. He's got the same inflection as Martyr Made. It's obviously Martyr Made, but he's very calm. And he's very blah, blah. Your writing is, a lot of italics, bolds, blah, blah, blah. But he's not reading the italics and bolds, right? So reading your piece is much more kinetic. Mm-hmm. Whereas hearing him read it slowly, it came off as like incredibly meditative and deep and like really insightful, especially when you're talking about the way that Adderall affects your brain. I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe it so accurately and so well, of how it sort of vacates your creative side, and then you get into these horrible things that have happened to you on day 3 of no sleep on Adderall. Like that was really, really good shit. And you just published this, and I highly recommend everybody reads it. But in there, speaking of being calculating, you have this sort of passage where you're talking about all the mistakes that you've made on day 3 or day 2 of Adderall abuse, and you say that you like had some sort of interaction with a girlfriend's dad who was a high IQ Jew.
Oh
like
yeah,
140 IQ Jew. So what was that? What happened with that?
Oh, okay. Did you ever read the story I had about Rebecca, the girl, the alcoholic Michelin girl who, I interviewed her on my podcast actually. But
yeah, I heard the Michelin. I heard part of the Michelin girl interview. I was very interested in that, but I didn't listen to the whole thing.
Yeah,
she was also a sugar baby, right?
She was, yeah. Well, she started out that way. That she basically became a girlfriend. The thing is, like, it sort of like goes back and forth, right? A lot of these times. Yeah. So I mean, but I would say that with this girl. Yeah, so her dad, like basically, like I just wanted to like have her move in with me, and I was just gonna take care of her. But like her parents wanted to send her to a fucking one of these like rehab facilities. And basically, there's a thing in Florida where your parents, well, I mean, really anybody, like if you know somebody's addicted and you think they're gonna like harm themselves or whatever, you can. It's called the Marchman Act. You can just get them incarcerated. And if the state will just like lock them up. It's really fucking weird because like Florida is usually very libertarian, but in this one respect, it's strangely like Stalinist. So in any case, I was just trying to, outmaneuver her dad and try to, like allow her to sort of pursue sobriety in a more sort of agentic, sort of self-directed fashion. And in retrospect, maybe she just kind of did need to be incarcerated because she was just sort of out of control in a lot of respects. So, I mean, I don't know. But the thing is, I wasn't necessarily able to, I guess, hold frame against him as adroitly as I wanted to. The thing is, it's like, when it just comes to like bullshitting on a podcast and like, talking about philosophy or talking about a lot of different ideas, it's very, like just taking a ton of Addy and then like sort of just being very tired and like it doesn't like you don't necessarily need to like explore things very deeply or go very precise in your reasoning. But like Jews have a very sort of like litigious, like lawyerly, like they get like very big onto like the details and like legalistic sort of framing and like especially in like a high stakes sort of situation like that. Like I think I could have handled him okay if I were well rested. But the thing is, I was the main thing it hurts is my emotional regulation, and I get thrown off center very easily. And especially on day 3, like I will get paranoid, I'll get angry, I'll snap at like the smallest thing. And when you're in a high stakes business negotiation, especially against like a truly elite Jew, and when people talk about elite Jews, it's like people act like all Jews are like it's not true at all. Like it's really like the top like 2 to 5% of Jews who are like you see a level of it's almost like talking to them like they're constantly trying to blackmail you. But I sort of like it about them because it does kind of bring out like the best qualities in me. Like it makes me a sort of better businessman, a better sort of negotiator. So I don't like hate it about them, but it is kind of quite scary, when you're going up against it. And you have to be well rested, and you have to be like, you have to have that emotional regulation. If you don't have that, then a lot of people will just crumple, right? And I did crumple when.
So what did you do? How did you crumble? What happened?
I wasn't consistent. I snapped. I overreacted to certain things.
You snapped at him. You got pissed at him.
I did. Yeah.
Because you guys were arguing about whether to put her in jail or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And the thing is,
that's intense.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, he was talking about sending a private investigator to like figure out where. Well, I mean, it was just like a bunch of, and he was saying that, like I could go to jail and stuff. I mean, yeah, it's that kind of stuff. Like they'll always like try to like blackmail you and sort of like make you personally. And again, it's like some people really hate that, but it's like I see it as like a steel sharpens steel sort of thing. So I sort of like looked at it as my own failure. And if anything, it was sort of good in the sense that it taught me, there are certain situations.
So you just lost your temper basically at him, and he was like, "Fuck this, we're sending her to." Yes. They sent her to this jail, rehab, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you might not have been able to win that regardless, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe you just had no chance to begin with. Maybe it doesn't matter what you said.
He seemed reasonable at first, though. So I mean, I feel like I probably could have. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily productive. Like thinking about like what could have gone differently, crying over spilled milk. But I do just know going forward. I mean, like there's been so many situations in life. Like I probably lost like millions of dollars and a lot of good girlfriends and stuff just because on the last day of an Adderall binge, I go fucking insane, so. Well,
dude, it's 3 days. And how many milligrams are we talking about?
Oh, the funny thing is it's a 20 milligram pill that I take, but I would usually just take it whenever I'm feeling tired. So I wasn't really keeping track. But I have 3 prescriptions. one from a former sugar baby, one from a former like an ex-girlfriend, and like they just like they have their own, and then I have my own too. Well, I mean, I canceled theirs now because I'm trying to, but I've tapered it down. I'm just taking a little bit myself now, just so I'm not like completely withdrawing. But it's like a very small amount. It's probably like 5 to 7 a day. Because
So how when these benders you used to do, how many pills are we talking about over a 3-day span?
Oh God, I mean, I don't know. Like probably in a given day it would be like 3 maybe or 2. I mean, it's hard to say. Like usually I would take like 2 or 3 a day probably, but like I don't think in terms of days. At least I mean I wasn't. I was thinking in terms of like 3-day cycles, and I didn't really pay attention to the whole circadian. You know what I mean? Like I was like intermediated from that, I suppose.
No, that's super dangerous, man. When if you're taking 60 milligrams a day, not sleeping, and then taking 60 milligrams the next day, that's that's dangerous, man. You really can't do that. I mean, like you can do it for a bender, but you got to really recover. Whereas doing that consistently, like you'll fuck yourself up real bad. So it's good that you got off of that, man. You don't want to get back there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like you read about like the Nazis, like
Oh
there was a
yeah.
lot of women use going on there, right? And it's sort of
Yeah.
like you can sort of like see like I don't know, like I've sort of been Hitler in the bunker, on certain occasions, right? Like you get like really paranoid, you get like really fucking,
Oh yeah. Well,
everyone's
no,
your
you
enemy.
see him. I mean, you see him shaking. You also, I mean, JFK, they were injecting amphetamines in those days. They gave them injections, and they'd go for 3 days on end. But that's different because they're in the middle of war. It's a different situation. You know what I'm saying? We're not
Right.
in wartime, so it's also that fucked them up really bad. It's a different situation, and also. Yeah, it's like if you're doing that for a couple days in some sort of war scenario, it's different than if that's just like your life all the time. Like
So I
that's.
will say I do know a lot of guys in the military who they say that Adderall abuse is very common there, like under
Oh, I'm
the.
sure. I mean, I'm sure everybody does it. I mean, in professional athletes, I mean, like, dude, my personal opinion is Adderall XR is the greatest drug ever created by man
100%.
because it's like perfect. It's like a perfect drug. And just because it's so balanced and it's not, it doesn't make you pay too badly later. But yeah, it's an amazing drug. And think about how many hundreds of millions of dollars went into perfecting basically meth, for this purpose.
Have you
So
seen the
not,
statistics of how many like Zoomers these days are on? I mean, it's really like, in my opinion, the only reason we can compete with like the Chinese like Confucian work ethic is because America has like Europe isn't productive anymore. It's not like innovative these days.
right, because none of them are taking Adderall, right? Whereas we're all on Adderall all the time. No, I mean it's really amazing. It's amazing to think that this entire generation, especially of like people in DC, they're all popping this shit. And, I had friends who worked at law firms. Everybody in there, they were
Yeah.
popping it all day long.
Oh, and like you have truckers, you have
Yeah.
like housewives who want to like lose weight. I mean, like everyone, like it isn't even just like strivers, right? I mean, it's all throughout our society. And the thing is, it's like the advantage you get from taking it is so big that I mean, I don't know. Like, if I were still like an actuary, like back in that world, like I would not be able to study for actuarial exams these days without it. I mean, it just like the attention span, especially when you have so many. And I think to a certain extent, Adderall is it was almost like a necessary technology to fight back against. I think about like the Middle Ages, how like there was like an arms race, right, between like weapons technology and armor technology. I think that Adderall is an armor against dopamine traps, like shit, like I mean, like it's its own dopamine trap, obviously, but against like if you look at like internet porn, if you look at like video games, if you look at all these fucking distractions, Netflix, all this shit that we have constantly sucking in our attention, who the hell can just like clean their house or like do your fucking work or like go check your mail? I mean, like all this shit, like I think it was just kind of necessary for us to invent something like that. Now, I think that the problem is like once you take the Adderall and then you like just start playing video games with it, because that's like the most fun thing in the world, right? So like that's what I always tell people to avoid. Like if you're gonna take it, only take it when you're doing something really fucking boring. Like do it to get your taxes done or something. Like don't do it just to make regular life more fun.
Yeah, and it also makes you a much worse writer, sadly. Which you say, it really cuts off. There's something really weird about what it does to the creative side of the brain, and you can see it everywhere, dude. If you
Yeah.
read almost any mainstream writing, you can just like see the Adderall in it, because
Oh yeah.
people, it's just, yeah, you kind of lose the ability to judge like what you're writing, you know. And
What it does is it cuts you off from your unconscious mind, I would argue, and it like dampens your right hemisphere functionality. So I
Right.
find that, for instance, after several days of Adderall abuse, I stop hearing melodies very distinctly with music. Like it starts to sound like noise. Like so my ability to sort of have and also like I can't write like poetry, right? Like I can write like you know, a very autistic sort of think piece that's not interesting, but like I can still sort of do like the Walt Bismarck like spicy like essay, but like not as well, right? But then I can't like write poetry at all, like it just or like original songs. It's just like I can kind of do a song parody maybe, but like anything that requires actual creativity, yeah, I mean it obliterates it because it's, you know, what it also does is, at least for me, it makes me stop remembering my dreams. And I don't even know if I dream at all. Like they might be very just like not vivid, or they might be very sort of indistinct or ephemeral. But like I think that like having very rich, vivid dreams, that's a right hemisphere functionality sort of thing. It requires an you know, I don't know how familiar you are with Jungian psychology, right? But it requires having a very like good sort of connection with your unconscious. And I think that Adderall just like completely obliterates that. And I think the reason not a lot of people have spoken about this is that I think most people who get into Adderall are the sort of people who aren't very into, you know, stuff like Jungian psychology, because I mean, there probably is a natural. I mean, I think those people are into like psychedelics, you know.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's like pretty friggin' uniform now. I saw a funny interview with some like pretty famous pop star girl. You ever see these things on Instagram that are my 10 favorite things? Have you seen that?
No, I don't go on Instagram that I like unless I'm just messaging somebody. But
There's some like you know, one of these kind of grunge, yeah, Dream Baby Press. It's one of these you know, just New Yorkie.
That's Ivy Woke, right?
Is that Ivy Woke? Is she Dream Baby Press?
I thought it was, yeah. Maybe.
Oh, that would actually make sense if that's the case. That's actually funny if that's true, because I could see that. I could see that being Ivy Woke. Is that Ivy Woke? I don't know. But speaking of Honora, she's in Honora. But they do this, you know, it's yet another one of these just scene stir fucking things, unbearable. But they do these really great 10 things I love, 10 things I hate with famous people. Mm-hmm. And they're great. It's like the best piece of like journalistic content I've seen on Instagram in years. And they one pop star on there, like they get pretty big people. And there was some, Casey Musgraves. She's like big, right? She's like kind of famous. Mm-hmm. And one of the things Casey Musgraves loves is when the Adderall kicks in. And it's funny to think of Casey Musgraves, who's like a country artist. I don't even know who Casey Musgraves is. I think she's some kind of country musician.
Yeah.
But it's funny to think of her like sitting around taking Adderall. Like, why is a musician sitting around taking Adderall?
You know,
country,
it's like it's
right?
so funny. Like it's a lot of those country musicians these days are like yuppies. So you know, it's
yeah, it's right. Yeah, she's like a Nashville. She's like a Nashville person, which is like, right? Is that country? She's just like a bullshit creation. But yeah, it's like it's funny to imagine like all these girls, like how they're all fucking just ripping this shit, because you don't eat. You know, you can just live on whatever. So.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. That's true. It does. Like a lot of women. Like it was sort of like before Ozempic. It was kind of like the sort of Ozempic du jour for especially like sort of like ED sort of girls. So yeah, no, that's kind of interesting. And these, I mean, it's still cheaper, I think, by quite a bit. So yeah, a lot of people do still take it for that purpose. I mean, they used to give it to housewives to like lose weight and shit, like in the 70s and 80s, right? I mean, it literally was just prescribed. So
yeah, here's Casey Musgraves, her things she loves. Yeah, man. No, it's really absolutely fascinating phenomenon, Adderall. Like we are going to, in the future, this will always be known as the Adderall era. Somebody's going to have to get a hold of it at a certain point, because it's certainly Faustian bargain, right? I mean, there's no way that this is like healthy or sustainable in any way. Like there's no, like it's absolutely unbelievable that everybody's just walking around on this stuff all day. But
we remember like in the 19th century, like everyone was like an alcoholic, right? Because once we had industrial scale liquor production, it's like, it's probably the same sort of thing. It's like, I'm sure people were just going around like beating their wives, fucking gambling, fucking, whoring, they were just drunk all the time. And I think it's probably, something quite similar. Like we
Yeah.
probably have a certain amount of like manic behavior that's just like, sort of normalized, and we don't even notice it because it's just the water we swim in. Like a fish doesn't, a fish isn't wet, right?
Yes.
But it's like,
Well, no, I mean, and this is something I talk about all the time. Alcohol. So I quit drinking 2 weeks ago now, which fucking sucks. I hate not drinking.
oh, congratulations, man. That's
Well,
awesome.
I mean, I'm gonna go for it for a while. But yeah, I mean, you look at these stories of the founding fathers, of people who started businesses, and they're like, oh yeah, we would go out on. The guy who started Ameritrade is famous for. He has a famous quote where he was like, yeah, Friday nights we would go out and have 15 beers, and I'm sure it wasn't healthy, but that's how we did it. That's how we coped with our time. And yeah, I think that Adderall is that for today's world. It's like, our founding fathers or the earlier generations were straight dudes who got drunk and, banged their mistresses or, got fucking hammered till 6 a.m. with each other. Whereas now we've regressed into bugs, and now we like pop Adderall and
Exactly.
jerk off, and like the
gays.
gays, like our meth parties. That's like that's the new thing people do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the drinking was better because I think alcohol really makes you just like people so much better, and
Yeah.
I mean, I really do think. Part of the reason that I think we have the atomization, I mean, this is a very sort of like midwit obvious take, right? But like, I sort of feel like the reason we have the atomization is because, people just don't drink as much anymore. I mean, that's why Zoomers don't fuck because they don't drink. They smoke weed.
Yeah,
Sit in the
right.
room,
They smoke weed and they like whack off 17 times a day. So, all right, let's return to the elites here a little bit. So you also say, just understanding the elites, you worked in big time consulting, so you saw this stuff up close. You saw how all these things work. You said in a recent podcast that I liked that elites are constantly fighting each other in a way, and so it's like trying to affix morality to them is sort of silly. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Okay. So like, if you have like two like ultra apex like high status guys going after one another, I mean, they sort of just game around the possibility that like one might take the other's business idea, one might steal the other's girlfriend or mistress or whatever. I mean, that's just like a very normal thing, and like that, like the normal rules of morality don't apply to that.
Yeah.
Like I think that and what I mean by that, I'm not saying this in a normative way. I'm not talking about shoulds. I'm talking about just the way it is. Right, because like I don't really have an opinion as to whether or not this should be the case. I don't really care. It's more a question of just the way these guys act. Like if you have like Mitt Romney and Trump, or like even like Trump and Obama, like there was that picture of them at like the funeral for I forget, was it Carter or Bush? I don't know, but they were like smiling, and a lot of people didn't really get that. And somebody pointed out, I think it was VB Knives on Twitter. He was like, if you actually think like any of the elites like it's like personal for them, you're like retarded. It's like it's not. It's kind of like a game. and the thing is, it's like a chessboard, right? They each have like Obama and Trump. They each have their own little pieces on the board. And like they're not. I mean, and I'm sure that they do still like personally care about it. But like once you reach a certain level of power, like it's not. Like stuff does just become a bit more like fungible to you, right? And it's not as like you are just thinking strategically. Like you have to see things from a bird's eye view, and you're not going to be as personally invested. And you might be in like your kids or stuff like that, but it's like you're not going to be like you just can't function as a high level guy if you're that personally invested in shit. And one of the reasons I got out of the world of high level consulting is I'm not somebody who can do that, right? And I'm trying to like develop that ability. I'm trying to develop better sort of like a better sense of stoicism.
Not somebody who can do what?
Like separate like be very clinical and be very like not personally invested and not get like personally like here's the thing is that like oftentimes but in these sort of elite power games they will sort of do things to throw you off balance. It's like in the Art of War, if your enemies of a choleric temperament like upset him, right? They'll sort of like go after your family, or they'll like they'll like hit on your girlfriend, or like in a business negotiation they'll sort of like, do you remember in Rocky when the black guy, Mr. T, he was like hitting on Rocky's wife or whatever to get him to fight him or whatever? It's like it's sort of similar dynamic. Like you see shit like between like the actual alphas, there aren't any rules, right? And like the rules are for the people underneath as a way of sort of sorting out, adjudicating the status hierarchy. But all is fair in love and war. And when you're sort of dealing competing status hierarchies or competing sort of like big dogs, like it just doesn't work that way. And it's kind of like naive to sort of impose that sort of morality, because the thing is like the guy who does is going to just get outcompeted by the guy who doesn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and this is something I've noticed in the internet sphere. So in the internet sphere, you're saying everybody in the elite sphere, everybody's trying to blackmail each other all the time. Everybody's got these weighted hammers on each other, right? I am a total kulak slave morality guy, right? Like I believe in God. I believe in being a good guy. I believe in being a real G. I believe in being like a thug life, like, street code, all these fucking things, right? But on the internet, kind of what you're saying is like if you want to elevate into this sphere of kind of the movers and the shakers, you gotta like not think about things that way. Like you can't be like, I'm gonna tell the truth, right? You can't be like, I'm gonna never. Well, I mean, here's the big thing that you're not allowed to talk about: doxing. You got to say, I would never dox anybody. And you got to say which I wouldn't, right? Because I'm an idiot. But like, or like, the things that people have pulled on me before, saving old DMs that are somehow incriminating and then pulling them up later, which to me seems like the gayest, most female, non-real G behavior you could fucking imagine.
Yeah.
Yet people have pulled this on me all the time, and I have no response because I'm like, I'm a good guy. But kind of what you're saying is, all right, well, be good or be good at it, as Lil Wayne says. Like, okay, yeah, you can sit there and be a good guy all day, but you're just going to then, you're not going to be in the game, kind of.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's sort of annoying. I think that a lot of like powerful guys in practice have like a fixer or have people who handle the sort of dirty work for them because number one, it sort of like outsources the cognitive load, which it's too stressful to think about like all your haters and losers, all the time. Number one.
Tell me about it. This is my problem in life. I'm
the same way. Like I have a ton of people on Substack who just like fucking hate me for. I mean, I'm pretty inflammatory, so it's not no reason. But I have one person who's basically a stalker who
really.
Yeah, no,
it's
the
stalker.
Like, this guy, the problem is like a lot of the women who I've sort of like spoken to on Substack, like he's like thirsted after them, and then he gets mad because like they don't respond to him as much. So he has this fixation on me. It's actually like really fucking weird. It's almost like I don't know if you ever saw that movie. It was in the 90s where it's like the girl tries to like impersonate a roommate. Like it's like a really
single
weird,
white female.
Single white female. Yeah. This guy's like fucking. He's a absolute.
You're getting.
He accuses me of being a narc, and he's like warning all these people. It's like when you have somebody like that. I mean, I thought about like taking legal action or something, but at the end of the day, it's almost like that itself is like really like you have to ignore it, and then if it starts like seriously damaging your reputation, like then you go after it legally. But the thing is, it's almost like
okay, so that's your yeah. Let me ask you. So, what is your policy? I need you to like be my advisor. This is what you should offer, Walt, because you really see through this shit very, very well. And how do you deal with these types of threats? When somebody threatens you, right, on the internet, which they do all the time, and what do you do? What's the move? Do you go after them? Do you try and crush them, or do you ignore it? Like, how do you decide?
If it's just some some asshole who has like no influence or no clout whatsoever, it makes you look, it brings you to their level if you engage with them like that. Like really, like the highest status thing to do is ignore them. Because the thing is, it's like you always have to look at like what are the sort of signals that your behavior is sending off into the universe, right? And like part of the reasons I think this way, and like oftentimes people call me very slimy or calculating or whatever, but like I think it's because I'm kind of a spurg. I don't
see. I think that's the opposite. I don't think you're slimy. I think you're the opposite of slimy and calculating. I think you're if you were slimy and calculating, you'd be a practitioner, but you're really not you're the opposite of that, right? You're not. You're a observer.
Yeah, exactly.
You're an observer.
Right. It's instrumentally less effective to speak about it. Yeah.
This is why I just went on Good Old Boys podcast, which is going to come out soon, and there's this whole idea that. Walter Lippmann, then Edward Bernays, were the fathers of modern propaganda, and they were the ones who said that the elites should control everything from behind the scenes and trick everybody. And it's like, no, dude, they were the ones telling you that that's what was happening. They weren't. I mean, like they did it a little bit, but they were the opposite of. They were the ones like what you and I do. They were revealing the system. They weren't implementing the system.
For people who don't
Yeah.
get this, like a lot of
Yeah.
people, they just take everything very straightforwardly at face value. And unfortunately, a lot of people on the right, they tend to be temperamentally predisposed to like low openness. So they want to like sort of interpret everything exactly as it is. And when you tell them like, no, this person has ulterior motives, then they'll suspect you, or they think you're like slimy. They'll think that you're the suspicious one for like seeing this in their behavior. But then inevitably when that person betrays them, like then, well, sometimes they'll come back and they'll have egg on their face, but then sometimes they won't even really sort of like, it's quite frustrating. But I mean, I sort of just found that, like, I guess for me, my strategy in dealing with this sort of shit is to like be as anti-fragile as possible. That's why I dox myself. That's why I sort of like lead with my worst possible motive, right? Always. And
Yes.
I feel like if you do that, that's a way that that's how you're Teflon. Right, because nobody can hurt you if you lead with the worst.
Yeah, and that's what I've done. I've implemented the same thing, right? I doxed from the beginning. I didn't hide being Jewish. I tried to talk about it as much as possible. I tried to push, and that did make me actually much more anti-fragile than other people around, because there's nothing people can stick to, right? Because it's like, all right, well, he's already talked about it all. Like, what are you going to do? It's also perfect because I run a branding agency, and it's like, all right, you're going to call me a shill? Like, yeah, I'm a shill. That's the job. It's a branding agency. That's the whole point. It's marketing. Exactly. Like, yeah, people pay me and I shill them. That's the idea. So that has been good in some ways, but also it's been bad because I think it has kept me out of the arena. I think it's kept me out of the arena in a lot of ways because people are like, oh, well, he's too open and he's not playing the game. He's not getting the compromat and, gatekeeping and doing all these, and he's talking about everything too much. He doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut. And I think actually in the long run, those things come from the desire to be moral. Right? They come from wanting to be a good person and wanting to tell people the truth, right? But
there's
in a
also,
way,
there's a countervailing impulse though, where it's like people are like, they think that the moral thing is to sort of obfuscate certain things because a lot of people can't handle it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that there's that, or there's the idea that like, can I trust this guy with my stuff? And I'm obviously the same as you, so like I've dealt with all this shit too. It's like, is this guy just gonna blab about because there's certain guys who they'll be very sort of like Mitt Romney in public, but they'll with they're on a business trip, they'll go to like the strip club with their buddies or whatever. But it's sort of understood that just you're a very radically different person in one arena of life than you are in another. And I think for us, like that's probably, it feels very stifling to do that, and we kind of want to like integrate all aspects of our lives, more. More organically. But I think that can be very difficult, especially in right-wing spaces where you're dealing with, you have guys like us existing alongside people who are just very sort of conventional and very low openness and very sort of like, cookie cutter and like, like nothing against those people. But it's like when you have that sort of cohabitation in these spaces, you get this natural tension where, like they're going to want you to shut up about a lot of stuff in your life, right? And it's like that's what I saw after writing the Stop Being Mean to Slutty. I think even you and Dudley were saying that when you first like reviewed it. It's like this guy is just gonna like it's not necessarily bad to be this way, but like you just have to be sort of like quiet about it because you're just gonna be inflammatory when you're too open. And I've sort of come to appreciate that. I mean, like not 100%, but like I think there is an extent to which you do just have to like modulate things depending on the audience, and you do just have to be. I mean, I don't know, like it's not like a straightforward thing. It's like it's something I'm always sort of adjudicating.
Yeah. I also think there's something to like, I don't know. There's something about, I think, right, like taking. I think what the genius of BAP is that he has taken a lot of the things that we're talking about and he's figured out a way to elevate them. Right. It's like he's figured out a way to do all these things. But not because it's so bizarre and because he's so, strange, and this character he's created is such genius. Like,
he writes in a very artistic style and he mediates it sort of poetically in a way that makes it
right. And that's the task. Like that is the task. The task is that he found a way to take this substrate that is gross and to process it into something not gross. I think
Well,
that's
some people would still
yeah.
say it's gross. I mean, I don't know. Like personally, I feel like it's a little. I mean, I don't want to.
You're not a BAP fan.
I'm not. No, I think it's a little homoerotic personally. And
Well,
again,
it's definitely homoerotic. That's for sure.
I mean, I'm not
very
even
homoerotic.
yeah, and I'm not even somebody who's like super anti-gay myself. It's
Yeah.
just like I don't like this fixation on like male aesthetics. And again, I'm like Michelin coded, right? So it's like I have a totally different sort of. I'm very sort of incorporeal. I'm a very sort of like like hyperverbal sort of person. I don't like this sort of like sword and steel sort of impulse you can get on the DR. But I mean, I'm just I come from a totally different tradition, a totally different trajectory. I'm coming out of the alt right, not the dissident right. So it's like I don't get that. I honestly just do not understand the appeal. And people compare me to him all the time, and I'm like, I think we're doing something so radically different. I really don't understand the comparison. But yeah.
So what's the difference between, again, like what I know that you were a big figure in the alt right. So what is the difference between the alt right and the dissident right?
Oh, there's a ton of differences. So I say the alt right was, if you compare it to chess, right? The alt right was Bobby Fischer, and the dissident right was Kasparov. In the sense that the alt right, it like shined very brightly for a brief moment. It was very aggressive, very sort of on the offensive. It had like very high ambitions, and again, it peaked very in terms of influence. I think it peaked a lot higher than the DRs has come. But I think that the DR has been sort of more lasting and more. It's a very sort of guerrilla movement. It's more. It's sort of optimized around being anti-fragile, because it really, what you have to understand about the DR is it sort of developed in the wake of Charlottesville. Like the alt right basically collapsed, in the year that followed Charlottesville, is you had a lot of the leaders kind of get deplatformed or get doxxed or get targeted by lawfare, by like Roberta Kaplan and others. So because of that, like the dissident right is sort of like optimized around like being. And I guess like a lot of the things I critique about the dissident right, like I say that they're overly defensive, they're not like ambitious in their mindset. They tend to be very hostile towards theater kids, I find, whereas the alt right was very like pro theater kid. Like that was
really that's an interesting. I would have never thought you said that.
Of course, yeah. Like Richard Spencer is the ultimate theater kid,
right? Because he's kind of theatrical, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, he did it in a masculine way. People think of it as like faggoty, but like, look, theater kids get laid, right? I mean, if you think it's if you think of it someone like John Mulaney or something.
So. I mean, no, totally. Dude, it's always yes. Theater kids definitely get laid. That's very true. The more performative you are, the more pussy you get. That's definitely true.
And that's why chuds hate theater kids. I mean, at the end of the day, but I mean, I find that I think that I sort of see myself as a continuation of the alt right and not dissident right at all.
So what happened to Richard Spencer? So you're saying this all basically led into Charlottesville.
Yeah.
I've heard this story so many times, but I've never, I was completely absent for all of this. So, I mean, I wasn't absent in the sense that I wasn't right wing. I was very pro Trump, but I didn't know any of these things. I was like posting shit on Facebook.
Yeah.
And like, drinking with my friends. Like I was not involved with this. So, I've only really been around for 3 years. So the alt-right is like baked Alaska, right? Like Richard Spencer, who else? Milo.
Yeah, I think of the right stuff guys. I don't know if you
also they're very alt, right? I mean, they're extreme.
Well, yeah, they basically became caricatures of themselves, like but they weren't always like that. Like I sort of came out of that milieu, and it started off as just like edgy libertarians, and it became like this weird, like they got audience captured.
Right? Well, exactly. That's the audience capture is fucking when this is what people don't get about anti-Semitism. People think, I'm being anti-Semitic, I'm taking a huge risk. And yeah, you are, but you're also not taking a risk because you're getting huge protection because you're going into this tent that is very secure, very self-help, and you see people go into that tent and they just get lost in the tent because as long as they just anti-Semite signal all day and they decide that every single issue in the world comes back to Jews, they get protection from that little group, right? They get really good protection from it.
No, the bravest thing to do is to be like moderately anti-Semitic.
Exactly. No, exactly. It's like the hardest thing to do is to fall in the cracks between these things, which is what I think. That's where you and I are, is like in the cracks between things. And, either you're kind of a creepy crypto Jew who like Shriver, who's like talking about winning, or you're Jews win, Jews rock, or you're straight anti-Semite. And I think that really went like that, like it just like split like really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm right in the fucking middle of it, and both groups hate me now. Which
what
is
I
like
find is
what's gonna
that
happen.
oftentimes these people hate Michelins more than they do Jews. Like I think oftentimes they hate because they can see like they can understand like the fucking logic and what you're saying, and they'll see like you're not. And again, I'm not a Michelin at all, but I know I sort of come off like people call me Michelin coded all the time, and I think it's there's probably a lot of reasons for that. Like my best friend for a long time was a Michelin guy, and then the girl I dated, Rebecca, was I. So I mean, I think there's actually. I don't know, like there probably is something in my character. Like I have sort of become almost like that by association. Right. And I guess like, I think that there is something, I was going to ask you about this, by the way. Do you think there's anything in particular, like different about, how like Asian, like within the Asian community, there's a debate about like whether it's your mom or your dad who's Asian, that like they'll say that has like certain implications for your, like, do you think there's anything similar with Jews, like whether your mom was the Jewess or the Shiksa?
Yes, I do. I think that almost all the Michelins in our scene are dad Jew Michelins.
Yes.
And a dad Jew Michelin is much more like they're less earthy, like a dad Jew Michelin is much more of a game player. They're more of a maneuverer. They're more of a political person. Jewish men, in my experience, are. I always say Jewish men are women and Jewish women are men, right? Jews they are this, as much as I say this is not true, we are this kind of chimeric reversal in a lot of ways, right? Again, I am not anti-Semitic. I have learned very much the hard way to not trust or be involved with actual anti-Semites who really do actually hate Jews. Like that is not good. Like it's a bad condition. It's not American. It's not a good thing to do. Don't deal with those people.
And they act like all the stereotypes of Jews. They'll backstab you. They're very greedy. They're very selfish.
Dude. And they, what's the most fucking frustrating thing in the entire fucking world is to like show up at an event or like hire somebody or talk to somebody and you think, oh yeah, okay, whatever. They're critical of Israel. They're critical. You can make fun of Jews. It's funny. Ha ha ha. Whatever. That should totally be allowed. And then you realize that actually they think that you are somehow trying to like undermine them or actively parasite them because you're Jewish. Like that is so fucking frustrating to experience. I never really experienced that until the last 3 years. I never saw people actually treat me differently because I was Jewish. I never experienced it. And when you actually experience it, it's fucking infuriating.
You know what's weird? I had a buddy he was a big leader in the alt-right back in the day. They kicked him out. He built this massive community on Reddit, and they kicked him out of the fucking thing because they figured out he was a Michelin. Now this guy was, I mean, like, and he was a dad Jew Michelin who like really hated his dad. It was like this big fucking like, it was like Shakespearean, right? And it was like so tragic because he really identified with like the Roman Empire. He was like a big like Roma-boo and stuff, and it just like so I mean I stood by him and they kicked me out too, even though I was like a huge content creator.
Really? Who was that? Who was this that you're talking about?
I shouldn't mention his name, but like people.
Okay.
But people, I mean, he was big. If anyone does the digging on my history, they'll figure it out. But like this guy was like massive, and it was really. But there were a lot of Michelins in the alt-right back in the day. But the thing is, it's like people like both Jews and Nazis don't want to talk about that, right? But it's like the thing is, the alt-right was in many ways. Again, this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but I think it was in many ways a sort of Michelin movement because I think now this is something I theorized. I think you had a lot of these like narcissistic Jewish guys who married chicksas in like the 20th century, and they produced the sort of cohort of Michelin guys who sort of like resented their dad because their dad didn't think of them as Jewish, and there was a sort of like disconnect there where there was a rivalry with the father, and it was a very sort of I think it was like an anima projection, the whole like feminine aspect of Jewish men thing. Like I think Jewish men would sort of like attack their sons in a sort of feminine kind of way that it would create this fireball of like animosity. And I've seen this like I saw it most prominently in this guy, but I've seen it in like 2 or 3 other alt-right guys, and like there were a ton of like high-profile Michelins in the alt-right. And I think that now these days like Michelins can just like I mean there's Dan Baltic, like I know a ton of guys in our circles who, and I'm like very Michelin coded myself, so I think these days it's kind of okay, and I'm glad about that because I think that to actually like litigate the Jewish question in a way that's like useful and not retarded, like you like really Michelins are the best people to do that. So
is Dan a mom or dad? Do you know?
I don't know, but
I would think he's a dad. I would imagine he's a dad. He seems like a dad Michelin type. There's very, very few mom Michelins, actually. I can't think of any other one.
There's a lot of them being produced now. But,
Yeah, I can't think of any others besides me. But well, actually, the ones that I do know who are mom Michelins, I do know a couple of them, and they're all like not even, they're not in the sphere at all. They're all like professionals, like they're not dealing with this. But yeah, I think there's definitely a difference. The difference is, the ones are more like kind of calculating, whereas the mom Michelin Jews are much more emotional. They're much more kind of like emotional. They care more about being like good people. They have all the sides of Judaism that are like the earthy, kind of like emotional sensitivity kind of things. I think that that's generally the metric. But yeah, it's an interesting time. It's a weird thing. And dude, you're so smart about this stuff, man. You really gotta like what you just said is so dead on. It's about just how these things work, and you got to keep writing this stuff. Yeah, my only suggestion for you would be to don't italicize stuff anymore, because I don't think you need to. I think the points are so good that you're making, and you really you get the balance of these things like incredibly well. I don't want to just also talk about Judaism forever all the time, because it's just like, all right, at a certain point,
it absorbs the conversation, and it becomes. I've actually theorized about this though, and not to continue talking about Judaism, but I think it's actually interesting. I think that Judaism has a certain a metatextual, self-referential quality, where once you start talking about Jews, you only want to talk about Jews.
Yeah,
and that informs both anti-Semitism and philo-Semitism.
Yeah, and it's just really. I mean, we're experiencing it now. I get why. I've been calling this forever. And this was inevitably where this was going to all go. And I don't blame non-Jews for being obsessed with it. I don't blame them for noticing things. And I don't blame them for being obsessed, because I was also completely obsessed with this shit for a long time. Because it's hidden, and, you're not allowed to say it and all this stuff. So I really do get it. I understand why they care so much, but I'm hoping that they'll get to where I've gotten to, where it gets so complex. When you go down the rabbit hole, it gets so complicated that you arrive at the place where it's like, all right, well, you just got to judge Jews as individuals. You just got to be like, all right, well, some of them are good, some of them are bad, just like anybody else. And, you should talk about it. You can make fun of it and stuff, but that's really where you arrive. And look, if you really think that Jews cannot be a good person, then fuck you. I don't want to be, I don't want to be involved with you. Anyway, here, look, you have this poem that I know is very important to you. That is from this fabulous piece, again, Leaving the Methano State. And you talk about this poem. You say you have it framed on your wall, and it's The Welcome Man by Walt Mason. Maybe that's where you get your name. Do you want to read it really quick?
Oh, sure. I'll read the first stanza, because it's pretty, There's a man in the world who's never turned down wherever he chances to stray. He gets the glad hand in the populous town, or out where the farmers make hay. He's greeted with pleasures on deserts of sand and deep in the aisles of the woods. Wherever he goes, there's the welcoming hand. He's the man who delivers the goods. So that's the first stanza. I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing.
Yeah, keep reading. Read the whole thing.
Keep reading? Okay. The failures of life sit around and complain. The gods haven't treated them white. They've lost their umbrellas whenever there's rain, and they haven't their lanterns at night. Men tire of the failures who fill with their sighs the air of their own neighborhoods. There's one who is greeted with love-lighted eyes. He's the man who delivers the goods. One fellow is lazy and watches the clock and waits for their whistle to blow. And one has a hammer with which he will knock, and one tells a story of woe. And one, if requested to travel a mile, will measure the perches and roods. But one does his stunt with a whistle or smile. He's the man who delivers the goods. One man is afraid that he'll labor too hard. The world isn't yearning for such. And one man is always alert on his guard, lest he put in a minute too much. And one has a grouch or a temper that's bad, and one is a creature of moods. So it's hay for the joyous and rollicking lad, for the one who delivers the goods.
Great, man. Really, really good poem. They sure don't make them like that anymore. It also just goes with your style of being kind of like a pirate, sea shanty. It's got kind of a sea shanty vibe.
I turned this into a song, by the way. If anybody wants to, I made it a song on my channel, so you can take a look. But
So why do you love this poem so much? What does this stand for? You said that this
know,
poem sort of motivated you when you were getting into consulting, which is obviously very hard.
the funny
So-
thing is it has multiple meanings for me. I'm really glad you asked me about this because like the direct sort of like reading of it is very boomer. It's very just like, oh, you got to work hard and deliver value. And you know, that's if you listen to the song, I sort of like explore like different, like subtextually, I explore different sort of interpretations of it. The direct interpretation is that kind of like boomer thing. It's like you got to work hard and you'll be rewarded for it, and that's obviously true. The deeper interpretation is that as a man, like no one gives a fuck about like you just you know, by dint of your worth as an individual or whatever. Like your mom does, but nobody else does, right? Like even your dad will. I mean, he'll always love you to some extent, but like you know, he'll be like kind of embarrassed and ashamed of you if you're a loser. And then you know, like your male friends, like your girlfriend, like people, like they do sort of expect you to like do things. Right now, compare that to like as a girl. Like if a girl is like decent looking, she can be like 30 years old and be a complete loser, and nobody will think of her as a loser. As long, you know, if she gets like she can still get married and get like married doctor, right? But it's like as a guy, if you're like 30 years old, you have like nothing going on in your life, you know, like people will sort of like look down on you, and a lot of guys will feel like suicidal or be sort of. The point is as a man, your worth is very extrinsic, and you have to deliver. You have to like produce, and like young men need to be told from a very early age, like no one gives a shit about your feelings. People give a shit about what you produce, what you do. And the thing is, that's not to have this very sort of transactional hookery attitude about things, because it's like really people want higher order goods from you, not necessarily just like money or not like work or whatever. I mean, it's you know, but it's like you have to like provide value, whether it's being an empathetic person or a good friend or a good listener or you're funny. There's a lot of ways you can deliver the goods. Right. And in fact, I would argue that that's probably it's more valuable, and it's something that you should work on more than the other stuff. But, you know, like you do just have to like always be aware of the fact that, and it's a very brutal aspect of male existence. Right. But it's like if you game around that, and if you're just sort of aware of that at the back of your mind, it's sort of, you know, and the earlier you learn it, the better. And like it just enables you to have a certain like protection from emotional, you know, like downside risk that I think can, you know, you can become overexposed to if you do start to have like a feminine notion of self-worth, where you're just like, oh, I have intrinsic worth as a human being, which is just like, no, you don't, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. I remember a therapist telling me that once, saying you gotta. I mean, the funny thing is, he was like supposedly kind of like a masculine therapist, and he was also like actually based, which was weird. But he was like, you gotta just accept that you have value. You know, you have intrinsic value. You have intrinsic value. You know, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And you know, but I agree with you. I agree. It's like, no, you don't. Like, fuck that. Like, no, you gotta think about delivering the goods. And it really is true, man. Most people sit around and complain all the time, right? I love the last sentence here where he says. One man is afraid that he'll labor too hard, the world isn't yearning for such, and one man is always alert on his guard lest he put in a minute too much. It's like, dude, I hire people all the time, and it's exactly like that. There are some people that are just like, oh, I won't. And it's also very feminine, dude. I used to work with all girls, and they would be like, oh, nope, I have said I am not working past this time, and you know, I cannot. It's like, yeah, you know, I think that this kind of helps keep you focused on like, it's your job to add value. You know, it's your job to genuinely add value. And you got to figure out how to do that, man. And everybody's so, particularly men, are depressed and upset because they haven't figured out how to do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the thing is, when you do provide genuine value to people, like that's what as a man makes you happiest.
Happy. Yeah.
When
exactly.
you're needed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
because like
yeah.
we want to be needed. And something I really hate about it is a very sort of Gen X attitude that I think gets sort of propagated about, is this idea that we shouldn't need each other, that everyone should be this autonomous unit, and that like the best thing is, you know, I hear this in the context of like relationships all the time, like, oh, you should be happy, you know, by yourself before you're like in a and like, look, there's a certain thing to be said for like stoicism and just like, you know, being able to comport yourself, whatever. But like, I do believe that like we're not meant to be atomized creatures. I mean, like we evolved in these small tribal bands where people would be like always relying on each other very heavily. And look, I'm the biggest autistic neckbeard. I'm very like self-reliant and independent, but like I do just think that every human being does fundamentally need a tribe who needs them and who they're reliant on. But like they also, and you also like need to need others in a sense, because if not, like you'll become like a freak in a lot of ways that are just like maladaptive, right? And I've sort of like, I look at my own life, I've sort of like fucked my own life up in like certain ways just because I sort of optimize everything around not needing anybody else. And like once you do that, you can just become like this wizard in a tower who just becomes like very, I don't know, like there's something to be said for just like, it's a very sort of grandma sensibility that I'm sort of like aesthetically opposed to, like dispositionally, but I understand like why grandmas, say this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I think, I don't know. I do think young men just need to hear this. Like, nobody really cares about your feelings. Like, like you have to justify it first. And the whole idea of having intrinsic value. I mean, I think this is why Christianity and other, sort of monotheistic religions were able to spread, is because they do tell people they have intrinsic value. And there's a way to sort of compartmentalize that and have that within this like religious context. Like, men shouldn't feel that way, like in the work life and the romantic life or whatever. Like, they need to like be providing value there. But there is something about having some sort of like floor, right? Of like, you're at least going to heaven or something. I don't know. Like, I think that does just give people something because without that, the world is very brutal.
Yeah, but see, what I think God is finding your value. I mean, that to me, like, I view my life as a like rat maze where I'm basically trying to like follow the scent of what I'm supposed to do, and like adhere closer and closer to my godly purpose, right? I mean, it's like, I love when Kanye says, or whoever, I play for an audience of one. That's how I feel. I play for an audience of one. That's and I believe it. Like, I really actually believe it. Like, and the reason I believe it is because I've just seen evidence of it over and over and over again. I keep seeing evidence. Like, I follow my nose, and when I'm doing something wrong, I generally feel bad. And when I'm doing something right, I generally feel good, and it's, or, if I'm doing something that's more adherent to my path in life, I feel better, even if it means being less safe or comfortable or whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I don't necessarily think I would say religion is, for many people, it's a panacea of you're valuable, God loves you. But I think, yes, of course, that is part of it. That is part of it. But I just mean, like, there's also a part of it that's like can be divine purpose kind of.
Right. Well, that's the masculine, framing of it, right? Like, I would say that the it's purposeful, it's directed. It's very just like feminine to say like, oh yeah, God loves you. You're like that's why like a lot of women who aren't necessarily like high status in their own social or like sociosexual circles will become like very religiously inclined, because like that's a way that they can have that intrinsic value, because women want the intrinsic value, men want extrinsic value, like we want to be providing the value to people, and that's why having a sort of divine focus for that, I think it's like a it's like a refraction crystal or whatever that sort of like that gives us, because like otherwise I think that a lot of guys struggle with like, what should I do? Like, I could go try to make a lot of money. I could go try to rise in this status. I could go make art. I could go be an athlete. I mean, there's like a million things you could do. Religion kind of like gives you, especially in a world where it's like we have like too much optionality in a sense. It's like choice paralysis.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. I mean, and it's like feeling it out, I mean, like feeling out, like, what am I supposed to do? That's linked into something, right? That's linked into some higher order. It's not like, it's not like people think like, it's not like you're pre-genetically disposed to make art. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Why would you? Why would you be genetically disposed to make art? What?
Well, I mean, there's certain traits that can be measured though that I do think like do dispose people to like art. Like here's what I'd argue. Like the purpose of art is sort of like mediating certain concepts and seeing things metaphorically and seeing things. And I think I actually wrote a piece on this recently with my my cabaret show. I actually think that art it's really a vital aspect of civilization, because I think art facilitates empathy, and especially like really even like kind of destroys solipsism. Like I think you need artistic mediation in order to like understand, for instance, like the struggles of the opposite sex or even like other ethnicities or something, right? I think you need art to like get along with people to sort of like, because if you read like a book or if you hear like a song, from somebody who has like a different sort of life experience from you, it can sort of like translate it into a more universal emotional language that I think facilitates that empathy, and I think that creates the possibility for higher order institutions and more complex civilizations.
Yeah, right. Yeah, metaphorical understanding of things. All right. Well, in our last 5 minutes here, tell us what's going on with Tortuga. I mean, first of all, are you out of the jungle on the Adderall withdrawal, or?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I'm still tapering off. Like I'm still taking a bit, but it's not. You know, I think it's mostly at this point past the hairy stage. Yeah. So I'm glad you asked about Tortuga. I did want to show that a bit. So basically, we've expanded quite a bit. We have like 130 guys in the group. I have a ton of testimonials on Substack, so you can go. Yeah. So anybody who's still worried I'm a grifter, you can go to Substack. You can see all the testimonials we have. You know, so you can see that we're legit. What I will say is that at this stage, the main value add we have is our community. It's a highly curated community of very talented guys. We're establishing a professional network where people are like several guys have hired each other. Several guys like own firms. You know Marcellino, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So he's hired somebody. I think there's a few other people.
Good old
somebody.
Marcellino. Yeah, I like him, man.
Yeah.
He was a guest on here.
Oh, really? Yeah. So I know he exists in like kind of a similar space as you. So yeah, we're doing quite a few long-term initiatives. The main thing that we're doing right now that is going to drive a lot of revenue coming in is going to be the staffing venture. And so this is where I am inviting people to collaborate. Basically, here's the idea. So we have 130 guys in the network now. Like a lot of these guys are really talented software engineers or data analysts or what have you. And we're going to start directly placing them into roles. And the cool thing about this is we have our own staffing firm now. Whenever we place somebody, we're going to get like 10, 20 grand from that. Right. So that could be a lot of money over the long term. Now, the thing is, to get the business up and running, we're going to be splitting it with everybody in our network 50-50. Whenever you refer us to a lead, right? Whenever you give us a lead, we're going to have you sign an NDA and everything so that everything we're making sure that the company is completely like locked down. Like we're not letting anybody see where it is, see what it is. But so we have them sign an NDA to protect that. But if you give us the lead, we will give you 50% of the revenue that is associated with staffing that role, with filling that position. So, you know, people can make a 5-figure sum in this if they're good at generating leads. And effectively, like this is going to be a way that we can all sort of like share in the plunder because it's a lot of these staffing firms are ridiculously. I don't know if you've ever worked with a corporate headhunter, but a lot of them they'll pay some sorority girl like 80 grand, give her like a VP title to just do completely, you know. But like
Dude, it's a waste. I was a part of this thing called Marketer Hire. Mm-hmm. And Marketer Hire was like, it was like an easy freelance mechanism or something that I was just like a part of. And they were a huge pain. Everything was exactly the worst type of SaaS thing imaginable. But, you know, it was a good way to get like some quick money because they'd pair you with some person that needed a marketer. I've somehow found out what they were marking people up. They were marking people up like 200%.
Yeah.
And I found that out and I flipped out. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You're marking this up you're charging people 3 times what you're paying me. And I was just like, man, this whole game, recruitment, is yet another one of these things that's like so fat and ridiculous. And the system is completely absurd.
And this is how you get rid of stuff like that, right? That you need pirates coming in, just like cutting.
And just doge it, dude. Everything needs to be doged, and nothing needs to be doged more than marketing. And and headhunting, obviously. So you guys are doging headhunting, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So anybody who wants to collaborate with us, like you don't have to be a Tortuga member, but obviously we encourage you to join. Anybody who wants to learn more about Tortuga, again, we started off as a job stacking thing, but that we've grown a lot beyond that. And I don't want job stacking to be our focus long term. Like that, like it's kind of a gimmick to get people interested in it. I mean, it's good for, you know, like it's good if you're like a software engineer. But the thing is, like most of the guys in our group now, they're not even software engineers. They're guys who maybe have like a history or philosophy or English degree, or they're like they're like a blue collar guy who's just training in SQL and Tableau and Python and everything like that, so they can become a data analyst, quickly get a 80-90 grand job at for some insurance company. And like that's really what I suggest guys do if they want to just kind of get in on the email job grift. So yeah, I mean, if you want to get involved in this, I have a full refund policy, right? So anybody who, if you're not satisfied within 30 days, we'll give you a full refund. And then I can also walk you through all the resources we have. So there's no risk. I'm not trying to grift you. I am trying to make money, but it's, that's something everybody in the space needs to do because it's frankly, the entrepreneurial drive is, I think, missing in the DR that I think, I think that would improve everybody's life outcomes. So.
Yeah. Well, and people, of course, they're, as we sort of said, they're very sensitive to the grift. They're very sensitive to the idea of, people grifting and being grifted. And, I think that for better or worse. I mean, it's all, where do you think this is going to go? It's all seeming very clumsy right now. The whole thing seems very clumsy. And, the dissident right and art and business. It seems like I'm not really getting the best vibes from what's going on.
Well, the problem is that anybody who's talented enough for it not to be clumsy, like they are incentivized to just become a mainstream figure.
Right.
And like it really, it's a sort of natural. And I think guys like us kind of exist in this like sort of like weird tension between those worlds. Yeah. Because it's like which one, like, because we could go the Hanania route if we wanted to, right? And then we could also go the like Lampshade 1488 route if we wanted to, but it's like I think we're both sort of like charting this path kind of like in the middle, and like we're following our instincts as best we can, and we're talented enough that we can support ourselves and find an audience no matter what. But it's also like like there's also this thing, it's like sometimes I feel like I could be optimizing for like truth telling, and like maybe I could be making a ton of money if I just talked about Jews on Twitter all day, and like I went hard in that direction. Or if I went and then I did the Hanania route and I was more of like a Iglesias type figure. I figure I could do either of those things, but I'd rather take the uncomfortable middle in a sense, because it does feel true to me. And I think at the end of the day, I don't know, like I couldn't be anything other than what I am, I suppose.
Yeah. So this squad you've got running, you've kind of figured this out. I mean, you're Tortuga, you're doing all kinds of things. It's evolving. How many do you guys have a meeting a week? How does it actually work?
Yeah, we have 2 stand-up calls where, usually between like 5 and 20 guys, depending on, how aggressively I've promoted it that day, if I'm being agentic. We'll kind of just talk about all the projects we're doing. Guys will share updates if they've gotten any new jobs, if they've gotten hired. We'll talk about different projects we're working on. So I have a ton of things I'm working on sort of adjacent to Tortuga. I have this dark cabaret show. It's like a vaudeville type thing that I've started working on. It's kind of a natural progression out of my old Disney parodies, really. But I'm going to be funding that with revenue from the staffing venture. So that's kind of and we're also going to be starting a sort of patronage network associated with Tortuga to fund art from people in our thing.
Okay, so wait, let's talk about this really quick, because this is what I talked to the good old boys about for almost 3 hours. Let's talk about what you mean by a patronage network. What do you mean by a patronage network?
So basically, like when I look at the left, you have a bunch of guys who have like who make like $400,000 a year, who just will randomly donate like $10,000 to like malaria nets for Africa, shrimp, shit like that, right? Like the effective altruist sort of people. And I look at the right, and it seems like we either have, you get $1 million from Peter Thiel, or you ask everybody and their grandma for $5, which is just trashy. And I feel like why don't we have because there are people in our thing who have money, but the thing is they either they don't have taste of the kind of like Kulak thing, or they will be sort of stingy with it, or very, very like sort of or they have like a family, right? They're just investing in their own family, or they're more sort of like the Dave Ramsey sort of. So I feel like it's sort of I want to create my own class of guys who are still like, I want to create my own like fundraising network. Like that was one of the reasons I did Tortuga, is I wanted to create a bunch of software engineers who are making like $40,000 a year, who are loyal to me and will like put money in my art projects. So that's like half the reason I even did Tortuga in the first place, is that like the way I think about it is if you have a professional network of people who are already like shilling each other into jobs, who are already like collaborating on the best ways to get hired and juice the resume system and like all this shit, then I think that really lends itself. It really lends itself to ultimately, financing art, financing. I mean, I would love to be a sort of like fashy VC bro and like help people. I mean, I can put on my consulting hat and help people get businesses started, right? Because for me, I'm really good at starting shit. I'm not as good at follow through, but I can help somebody get something off the ground and move to a new one. Like that's what I would love to do long term. So like I want to do that with art. I want to do that with businesses, and that's kind of what I think Tortuga is going to allow me to do once we have the staffing revenue coming in. So that's sort of my long term plan.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say about art is that there's this sense on the right now, I think, that the mistake that I think the right makes in looking at art is thinking of art like they think a patronage network means you pay politically aligned people to make art, and then one of those pieces of art is successful. Right, you make 50, 49 fail, and one is successful. Right, that's not how it works. You're going to pay 50 artists and 0 are going to be successful. You're going to pay 2,000 artists and 2,000 will be unsuccessful. That's how the layer that needs to be sponsored in art specifically is not the artist layer. We don't need to start paying right-wing artists to paint pictures of cowboys, and then those are going to get popular in art galleries. That's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's just going to end up being like Angel Studios, right? You're going to have
I mean, like that's not what I like. I'm not interested in like right-wing art, right? Like I think that's kind of like
no. I'm talking about any art. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Cowboys, not cowboys, whoever. It's art. The art market does not work that way. What has to be done, you have to find the impresario layer. That's what needs to be swapped out. You need to find people who understand how the pipes work of publicity, how the system works, and get them. You got to pay them. That's who you got to get to really change the system. And the example that I've been using recently, people are going to get annoyed because I use this on every episode. What patronage actually means. Suge Knight, right? You know who Suge Knight was?
Oh, the guy, he was like kill people and stuff, right?
Yes. So Suge Knight was basically the father of gangster rap, more or less, at least on the West Coast. The East Coast had Puffy, the West Coast had Suge. And he was NWA, Tupac, Snoop, all those guys, with Nate Dogg, that whole thing. And everybody thinks, that was just an incredible musical movement, right? I mean, that sound, nobody'd ever heard these sounds before. It was talking about being from the hood, fuck the police. It was the #1 song in the world. NWA debuted at #1. Snoop debuted at #1. Gin and Juice. It's true that the quality of that was important, right? It was very, very good. It was very, very good. It was popular in Sweden. It was popular everywhere. But the part that people don't think about was that Suge outwardly says, I was on a payola basis with every radio station. I was paying them to play the shit. I was kicking them back to play the shit. They played the shit and they promoted the shit because they were getting paid, right? And the people who stood in my way in getting this stuff hooked into the system of publicity, I held them over balconies and forced them. He forced the music. He forced it. Right? He forced his music to get into the system, right? He forced it in. That's what we need. That's what patronage is. Patronage is not just paying artists to make art, right? For a political reason or for any reason. The patronage part is paying the radio stations. That's what patronage is. Yeah, because that's how the system works,
Yeah, well, I mean, like figuring out if the pipeline itself is impossible to control, then you have to create a new pipeline that's just as viable.
Or you create a new one, exactly. Or you create a new one, right?
But the thing is, whenever the right's done that before with Gap and I mean, it tends to be kind of shitty, and I don't know. I mean, I think we're having a vibe shift now with the whole Trump is a new kind of Reagan coded figure, so it's I don't know. I have some thoughts on that, but it's probably too much to go into. I guess what I will say is I definitely know what you're saying. What I'm talking about more though is there are certain projects just certain indie films that I know if somebody could just raise $50,000 for it, it would go viral. Right, it's it's a sort of thing where or there's a game idea somebody has a developer who if they could just quit their job and work on this, I know that we could sell it. It could just be an investment opportunity for people, right? There's certain shit like that, or my cabaret show, right? There's certain shit that I do know how I would promote this, and at this point I'm sort of enough within the Overton window that I think I could get this sort of popular in certain underground art scenes. Now, I definitely understand what you're saying. What I will say though is that I'm not a purely art sort of person. I do have a mind for business, and I understand scalability. The problem I think is that the sort of people who are good curators and good at scaling art aren't necessarily a lot of times artists don't want to do that themselves, and they have a hostility to that idea. And there's almost a sort of separation between those worlds. And what I want to do is be a sort of curator for people. And I definitely see what you're saying. I would love to play that sort of. I don't want to compare myself to Suge Knight. That sounds kind of crass.
I do, dude. I want to compare myself to Suge. I mean, Suge was a G, man, and he was. It was funny what happened with Puffy versus him, right? Puffy went the Epstein path, and Suge went to jail. Those were your choices, either let them bang you in the ass or let them send you to jail. You got to pick. Look, Suge was an evil guy, so no, I actually met him once in LA, and it was amazing. He had such a presence. He was one of those guys that has just overwhelming, like reality. Kanye was like this too, who I was met once, and like reality bends. Like when you're around somebody that's that big. Like literally, like reality bends around them, and you see it. And Suge was one of those. But anyway, yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much, man. I really fell in love with your stuff with this most recent piece. So keep it up with the very incisive explorations of how the world works. I think it's great stuff. Yeah, man. Where can people find you?
Substack's the main place, and one other quick thing I'll promote. I started a new engagement cartel. So if anybody wants to, I think there's a bit of algorithmic suppression going on Substack. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that I'm being sort of shadow banned. So I've been able to fight back against that by starting an engagement cartel. We get a lot of people to sort of like and restack posts at once. If you want in on that, you can just message me. I can explain how. But basically, we all sort of promote each other on Substack. So it's a thing that it's been kind of fun. So I do that adjacent to Tortuga. But yeah, Substack's my main place. I'm on Twitter, but I am barely on Twitter. So
yeah. So, but are you not worried? I saw you basically want to game the system, but the Substack system. But aren't you afraid they're gonna crack down on you? This is always the question for you. Aren't you
I know the CEO of Substack is aware of me because I pissed him off before because I got a guy unbanned as what was it, H1B Pajit. So I know he used to like my stuff all the time, but I think since then he's sort of been kind of frosty towards me. So I'm sure he is looking at it. The thing is that he wouldn't want an appearance I have enough clout that I could release an article basically proving that he's doing something. He would have to be heavy-handed, and we're developing some sophisticated tactics to go around. Excuse me, some very sort of overt algorithmic suppression. Now, what we're also doing is we're developing some automated functionality so we can just automatically like each other's stuff. So that's something some guys are making some macros for it. It'll scrape the list of links from Telegram, and then we can so we're working on that behind the scenes. If anyone's interested in getting involved in that,
but I don't think it does. Just a doesn't do anything for you on Substack, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, not in terms of so it's psychological, right? Is if you see a piece that has 90 likes, right? You're going to take it more seriously than a piece that has 5, and that does do something. It's an intangible effect. It's sort of like having an orange check mark. It sort of makes people once I got my check mark, people were much more ready to come on my podcast and shit.
Yeah, dude. When I chased the check hard, and I got to 107 paid, but then it turns out that I have 20 free in the system because when you make somebody a guest poster, that gives them the lifetime subscription. So it sucks because I thought I got the check, but I'm still 13 short of the check. So
you can push it. It's not that. The thing is, I have 250 right now, and I had 300. I've let it peter off because ever since Tortuga is making me way more money than the than the Substack right now. So I've kind of stopped chasing that. But I thought about chasing the solid one, so I could be on the same level as Hanania. But I don't know. I think you have to be after a certain point, there just aren't enough cool people.
Hanania has thousands of paid subscribers.
He does, yeah.
Dude, what the fuck? I can't.
I mean, his opinions are more normie, right? I mean, it's
dude, you're such a better writer than Hanania.
Well, I mean,
you could way do better than him, man. I would
have to moderate my thing. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you someone like Iglesias, he's a purple check. He has tens of thousands, right? It's the more normie you are, the more.
Well, and a lot of that's AstroTurf. You saw the whole thing about Midas Health. That's complete bullshit. The whole thing is fake.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shit, man. So yeah, I mean, do you think I should paywall this one or not paywall this one?
What I usually do is, when I was doing a paywall, what I would do is I'd find a juicy cliffhanger. And I would put it right before then. If I were to ask somebody, I had a guest on who was half Asian, and I asked him if it was dad or his mom who was Asian. And right before he said, I put it at the paywall. I got 3 people pay me $50 to figure it out. So.
To learn whether he was Asian. Okay, that's funny. Well, we'll see. Maybe I'll do that. All right, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I gotta run to a meeting that I'm very late for. So thank you, and I'll see you soon.
Yep. Likewise. Have a good one, man. Take care. Bye bye.